I am also Alexander, apparently. Everyone ready? Okay. All right. We have just had a really lovely Zen moment doing some chair yoga, and we're going to bring ourselves back into the space, and we're going to hear from our next and final panel on demystifying artificial intelligence. And it's part 2, and I'm going to ask my colleague Rick Torres, President and CEO of the National Student Clearinghouse, to come up and join me. Also, Alex Kaplan, Partner, Human Resources and Talent Transformation at IBM. And also Colin Reynolds, Senior Designer, Digital Transformation from the Education Design Lab. Take it away, folks.
Thanks. Okay, so we need a clicker. And there we go. Awesome. There we go. So, last session, what a wonderful 3 days this has been. So the first thing I have to tell you that I think on behalf of all of us, I can say it's great to be live. We did part 1 virtually last year, and it was a bit of a challenge, but we got it done. It was great, and but it's just tremendous to be here and to be able to share part 2 of what we're talking about in demystifying AI. Boy, if AI wasn't mentioned in at least every presentation at least once, along with interoperability, I think we've got, those are the 2 most common terms that I think we've had over the past few days. We're going to be talking about the future of work and education in the age of artificial intelligence. We're going to be looking at what we're calling the rise of the digital worker. What do we mean by the rise of the digital worker? It has a lot of definitions, so let's talk about that a little bit. Also about the importance of developing skills that are complementary to AI, right? What does that mean to complement artificial intelligence? And finally, the need for humans, that would be us, to be involved in the development and the deployment of AI systems. So there's always this tension about, are they taking over, right? Or what's the relationship between humans and artificial intelligence? And our goal for this conversation is to provide some insights and ideas on how to leverage AI to enhance skills and workforce development. And now I'd like to have our panelists just very quickly provide a bit of an overview on your relationship with artificial intelligence in your day jobs and what you've done, so we can then dive in. So Alex.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. It's great to be here, and it is certainly great to be live. It was disappointing not to be able to do that last year. So artificial intelligence is an essential component of my job. Not only in terms of how I use it every single day to do what I do at IBM. So I use it to help write responses to requests for proposals. I use it to search out information that's specific to the kind of task that I'm involved with. I used it to help to create this presentation. And so, you know, I just use the tool every day. And the way that I like to think about it is it's a guide by the side for me. So it doesn't replace what I do, but it gives me a baseline of data and information in a consumable format that I can then use in order to refine it. So it saves me a whole lot of time. Now, my professional work at IBM involves creating artificial intelligence-based solutions, particularly those that are focused on the human resources and talent transformation space. And in that world, it's been utterly transformative in terms of helping organizations to provide support to their employees and to their managers in a much more efficient and a much more impactful way than we've had before. So yeah, it's critical to everything I do.
Thanks. Alex, Colin?
Yeah, just want to echo what you both said about being here, being in person makes a huge difference. And I don't know if it was just the chair yoga before this, but I'm more comfortable sitting right now than I have been like in the last 24 hours. You know, AI all of a sudden became this very topical thing that impacted everybody, including schools. And as a former classroom teacher and administrator, I both envy students and teachers that have this really powerful tool, and I am also not jealous at all of the navigation that they've had to do inside of schools and systems One of the projects that I've talked about quite a bit this week is Experience U, and the whole premise of that project is taking unstructured learner-earner data and structuring it using AI to help credential individuals and help them find new opportunities, whether that's learning opportunities or work opportunities. And this whole project was actually put together before ChatGPT was announced. And 3 months in, that changed the whole perspective and the interest of folks outside of that project. So that's how I enter into a lot of these conversations is really the projects that we're involved in, both on the learning side and the earning side, have now been deeply infused with AI tools. And a lot of groups are exploring that. So I'm very fortunate to be able to collaborate with a number of different project teams and organizations who are trying to solve these problems, not just inside of their organization for their stakeholders, but across systems and across jurisdictions. And so there's a tremendous amount of AI and AI sort of collaboration happening through these different projects. So that's a kind of a snapshot to your point, Alex, too, of like, I have a little tab pinned that Claude is my AI agent of choice, mostly because I can create projects that I can build a knowledge base inside of. So it's more of like a small language model where I'm actually choosing the content to upload. So Otter's joining a lot of my Zoom meetings, and then I bring that content into the project database along with other artifacts that we're creating through that process. So it gives me a more focused, customed kind of playground to go back and forth with and have this kind of dialogue to reflect a lot of what I'm hearing in conversations and a lot of the topics and projects that we're diving into.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's go to our first topic, which is really called the rise of the digital worker. So I think, Alex, I'm gonna start with you. When we talk about the rise of the digital worker, what are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, so one of the concepts that's emerging in terms of the use of artificial intelligence as a transformation technology is that it can do tasks that are easily replicable, have well-defined business processes, have clear outcomes, require core sets of information, and it can do those tasks independently without a human being. And so a good example of this, for example, is that within our HR function, and this is true across HR functions in many organizations, the kinds of questions that we get from our employee population are 80 to 90% the same. People want to know, how many vacation days do they have? I'm taking maternity leave. What are the policies? I'd like to get promoted. What's the next step in my career? I'm applying for a mortgage loan. Can I get a letter? So all of this is what consumes the majority of the questions that people are bringing forward. And so historically, we had a call center, and you would call, and you would ask them those questions. Well, we were able to completely automate that using artificial intelligence. So rather than having to call a call center, we have a conversational agent, and you can go into the conversational agent, and you can say, how many vacation days do I have left this year? And it will tell you how many vacation days you have left. And so we call those digital workers, because I have now what we call Ask HR, which is an assistant on my desktop, where I can do most of my work as a manager, and I can ask most of my HR-related questions as an employee, and the agent is doing that work on my behalf. So it's actually a digital worker. Now, the beauty of that is it frees people up to do other kinds of things, and it removes this, this rote kind of work that a lot of people are still engaged in. And we'll talk more about the deeper implications of this as we go through the conversation.
Right, and one of the things that we talked about, Colin, as well, is that this is permeating many different industries. So Alex talked about HR, but we know accounting, software development, trades, right? Can you just want to expand on that a little bit on how this is proliferating through different sectors?
Yeah, a lot of the work that the Education Design Lab and our designers do, partnering with community colleges and employers to help reimagine learning pathways by focusing on the technical and durable skills that are most essential to specific job roles. And a lot of those roles are increasingly interacting with or requiring some sort of computer and human relationship, right? You think about electric vehicles, and a lot of the vehicles that we're driving around, a lot of buses actually. I grew up in a very rural part of northern Minnesota where New Flyer bus manufacturing, that's where a lot of those buses get assembled, and then they get driven off to different places. But those are basically computers inside of those systems. There's some mechanical stuff, but the nature of the technology and the requirements of individuals in terms of their skills that they need to work on these machines and to do what used to be very just analog jobs is increasingly grown to include relationships with computers and some sort of AI agent. Those are starting to enter in pretty commonly everywhere. But the focus on durable skills, and Education Design Lab has a durable skills framework, and we have a set of micro-credentials that represent those durable skills and a whole set of assessments that go along with it. But durable skills become increasingly more important. You can call them soft skills, transferable skills, but the ability to creatively solve problems, to collaborate with partners, to collaborate with others, to show resilience when things get difficult, like those skills are becoming increasingly more important. And so that's a lot of the work that we do, is focusing on those skills and how can we embed those into learning pathways to make it clear that these individuals are acquiring these skills in specific industry contexts and can demonstrate them across a variety of their job requirements.
Right, that's a great point. So in summation, what we're seeing here is that the rise of the digital workers in general is transforming the nature of work, but also redefining the skills that are required, right, to complement artificial intelligence. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? And, you know, we have a graphic here that's talking about the ways AI is transforming talent management. So what we're not going to do is go around the wheel and look at that. That is a background, okay? And for you to look at and understand the different touch points that artificial intelligence has within this cycle. But we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, the challenges and opportunities around skill-based hiring. So much of what we talked about over the last 2.5 days, 3 days, have been about skills and how employers need to focus on, you know, looking at skills to hire. Well, let's talk a little bit about where we're headed in this direction. So Alex, I think maybe have you talk a little bit about how skills-based AI-driven automation, you know, can you point to an example or two that you, in your experience, can kind of give an example of how artificial intelligence is playing in this space?
Sure. So IBM receives about 5 million job applications every year. So the way that we pare that down is we have an AI agent that reads all of those resumes. And it's looking across a whole variety of different vectors when it reads the resumes. So, you know, keywords, skills, employees. There's a whole set of dynamics that are at play here. And when it reads the resume, it's not only reading it as a standalone, but it also knows what kind of skills are required to be successful in that job inside IBM, because we have real world experience for the skills that are important if you're going to succeed in that job. So it's informed by real world experience, and it's looking at the resume, and it's understanding what the resume is trying to communicate. So when the recruiter gets the list, they're getting a very refined list from the agent that says this person, you know, has sort of a probabilistic perspective of being very well suited to what they do. Now, this reduces the load on the recruiter dramatically. Now, it raises a whole other set of issues.
Which we'll get to in a minute.
We will get to in a minute. But it dramatically increases the efficiency and also the accuracy of the work that the recruiter is doing. So again, it's a digital worker who's doing what humans used to do in terms of assessing a resume and determining whether they should move on to the next step in the process.
That's great. And we were preparing for this. You had mentioned some very specific work that you're doing with some low-income sectors with 110 and how that could play in. Could you give an example from the 110? And
yeah, sure.
Maybe explain what 110 is and then how we can, how it works.
So 110 is a nonprofit organization in the United States. Its mission is to create 1 million jobs, 1 million family-sustaining jobs for Black Americans, focusing on people without college degrees. So one of the things that's a really big challenge here is that For people who don't have a college degree, and this is sort of an IBM perspective on it, only about 30% of Americans have a college degree, so definitionally you're excluding 70% of the population. Well, it turns out that only about 50% of our jobs actually require a college degree to be successful in. So we're like, okay, we need to really sort of, back away from this, and we need to take a look at everybody to make sure that we can build a diverse workforce and we're taking advantage of all this talent that's out there. So 110 focuses on helping Black Americans be matched up with this. They have about 70 employers who are involved with them. Those employers post their jobs to a website. And what the artificial intelligence does is it goes through and it understands the skills that are required from everybody from, IBM to Merck to Lowe's to Kroger, you name it, to JP Morgan Chase. And it starts to create what I'd call a normalized set of understanding about the kind of skills that are required across multiple employers in order to be successful in applying a job. That information is then sent back to the 110 recruiters, who then work with the individual in order to understand what kind of skills do they need to build. And on that side, what we call the supply side of it, the recruiters have access to training organizations, community colleges, Udemy, other kinds of training vehicles to help those people build those skills. And then artificial intelligence is being used to create that match. So we're getting a much higher fidelity on both sides of it. And I might add, the user experience is highly conversational agent oriented. And it's really dramatically transformed the whole talent acquisition pipeline.
That's great. So, we were talking about, and that's a great example of what's going on. There is a dark side, though. And I think, again, if we're talking about employers and we're talking about the sea of resumes that are now coming in, the Wall Street Journal had a great podcast, if you can get your hands on it, from one of their technical briefings. And what they talked about is that businesses are now getting overwhelmed with perfectly curated resumes, perfectly curated CVs, tied exactly to the job description, tied exactly to the skills that are required. And, I told Melanie earlier, listen to this and put your heads in the minds of an admissions person at a university. Perfectly curated letters, perfectly curated, admissions-related materials. This is the world that we're in. So what's happening at the corporate level is that instead of one person applying to 2 or 3 jobs, they're using artificial intelligence to apply to 15 or 20 with perfectly curated, resumes. And what they're finding is that in many cases, the skills are actually fake. And they end up going to an interview, and during the interview, they're using ChatGPT to help inform the narrative.
Yep.
It sounds great. They walk in, and then when they actually get to the job, they can't do the work, right? And they are overwhelmed. And the punchline of the article was this: the industry is now trying to figure out how to take the tools that they were first using to curate and get to the short list that they could get to get through a much broader list. And now they're saying a technology that was supposed to save them money, they may have to go back to hiring more humans to actually cull through, right, these pieces of work. So I think this is something, as we're thinking about creating these engines and looking at, we talked about the importance of bringing in the employer, understanding their ROI and understanding what makes it work for them is really important. And this is an important lens, to kind of take into consideration as we're looking at this. So we're gonna shift now, and I'm gonna go over to Colin, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the role of AI in the skills and workforce development process. And what we do know is, one of the statements is that we know that AI can help match learners really well, and you have done a lot of work in this area. So Colin, I'd like you to really talk a little bit about how the work you've done in translating transcripts and skill credentialing using these language models, and just to provide exemplars of this.
Yeah, I think there's this assumption, at least in a lot of the conversations around learning and employment records, is that like learning and employment records can actually fundamentally shift the way that skills are represented in the hiring process by using verified credentials, by making sure that those credentials are representing skills that have been validated in specific contexts. That's really powerful in making those skills visible to employers on the other side. To most employers, a learning and employment record doesn't actually mean anything yet. Skills-based hiring means something. Doing skills-based processes means something, but we're really trying to connect some of those dots and offer individuals verified credentials that represent skills data that has been assessed and documented in a specific context that can translate to a context with a layer of trust that employers can say, I've seen these credentials, I see these skills, and I can trust them because of the technology that is supporting the interoperability across it. So to use that as a kind of a framing for one of the projects that emerged in this sort of the first phase of Experience U was really focused on demonstrating a proof of concept that we can actually structure unstructured data in formats that will help to translate that skills data and that trust through the translation of information and the sharing of data. And this project, what they did was they took, and this was out of Case Western Reserve University, and they took the Open Syllabus project, and I was talking to the director of the group behind that today and mentioned this. They took all the syllabi, and what they did was try to find common skills that could be inferred from Econ 101 or English 101, for example. And they're creating a tool that would allow anybody to upload any transcript, official or unofficial, to this tool and infer skills that they are most likely to have learned by the courses that they've completed anywhere along their academic journey. And bundling that into a format that would allow them to then put it into a digital wallet, help generate an LER, and bring those verified skills, validated skills to employers to represent what they're qualified to do. That whole process shows that we can actually do this in a meaningful way when we use AI to help do some of that translation and are really context specific about the type of skills, technical and durable, that an individual has demonstrated or inferred to have, or implied to have learned in specific contexts. So that was an example of a project that was really powerful and is now being scaled in a meaningful way to hopefully create a solution that's helping people who already have skills. Because a lot of what we talk about in these projects is like now moving forward. Let's issue a credential now to somebody who does something in front of us that we've seen and demonstrated, and they can take it with them now. There are individuals all over the world that have a ton of skills that they've demonstrated for years, but don't have a digital credential to represent that. So using AI to help kind of create an engine that we can scale for folks that need it the most to find opportunities that are available to them right now is a really powerful application.
And as you were developing the mapping, right, for all of this at Case Western, I mean, what was the process to go between just saying, AI saying, or using artificial intelligence to say, these are some skills that can be inferred from this, from validating it. It's the validation process, because I think part of this is who's backing up this inferred skill.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the way Education Design Lab approaches the validation of skills, and we have X-Credit is what we call the assessments for our durable skills and the micro-credentials. And that we've created research-based assessment tools that are kind of like a VR sort of role-playing scenario where an individual actually goes through and answers questions and interacts with an avatar to help go through some problem-solving situations to demonstrate those skills in context. So that's an assessment-first method for validating skills. At the end of that, if they pass, it's a pretty high threshold. A lot of people are actually surprised that it takes multiple hours just to go through one sub-competency of each of these skills assessments. And if they pass, they earn a credential that represents that in a different context. The other way we go about validating skills is by working directly with the courses that are being offered at universities or at colleges and the learning experiences to say, if we're going to have this learning pathway, many of the pathways that we develop are non-degree, non-credit courses and experiences. So we work with the designers, teachers, we're designers, they're teachers. We all kind of do both things together. We like to collaborate and co-design all of this alongside them. But we take those skills and we focus on where they might be taught and practiced in specific contexts. So if it's a work-based learning context, maybe it's in a classroom, maybe it's in the job that they actually have while they're taking night classes, and they validate those from another person. So this is the human side of this, is we've seen this in context, we have evidence to support it, and this credential is actually being asserted by the college to say that we know these skills have been validated here, we put them in a verified credential package and help that translate across the system.
That's terrific. And now, since you're talking about colleges and universities and community colleges, let's talk a little bit about the role of education, right, in all of this, and, you know, in preparing for the workforce of the future. And I think, you know, Alex, you and I have talked about this, and, you know, your anecdote to me was, look, this has been going on forever, right, where new technologies emerge, and we need to find we have to find a way to bring the classroom to engage with these new technologies. And I know you wanted to share a couple of examples and talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just a continuation that goes back to literally to the 1950s, right? I mean, I was very heavily involved in the introduction of computers into the classroom, which took some time, it was disruptive, people had to figure it out. I don't think this is any different than that, right? This is about understanding the power, the challenges of any kind of a new technology, and ultimately figuring out how to make it serve the purpose of improving outcomes for people, helping people realize their dreams, helping professors and teachers do a better job. So to me, this just fits right into this pattern. I think that some of the amazing potential for it, though, in the education space, and I'll sort of leave aside the efficiency part of it, which, you know, I think it could really help, but just in terms of recruiting students and those kinds of things. But I think where the real potential for me is really about helping students and professors and teachers be more successful. So I was involved in a project before artificial intelligence was like a hot thing when I was at IBM Research, and we created the first ever cognitive tutor embedded in a textbook. And this is a project that we did with Pearson. And we also did a project with Sesame Street where we created we wanted to focus on building vocabulary for young children. And so we worked with Sesame Street and we created an iPad application that young kids would work with on the iPad, because they were doing this all the time, with Sesame Street characters to help them build vocabulary. The technology is now so great that you can really have this interactive dialogue, but the potential there to help people learn is just so immense. And so, you know, again, we just need to embrace it. We need to understand it. We need to think our way through it. We need to do it the right kind of way. But right. I think that it's got tremendous potential.
You know, and what's interesting, Colin, you talked about some of the work that Education Design Labs has done looking at durable skills, soft skills, and things along those lines. Let's talk a little bit about the skill sets, right? What are some of the common skill sets that are necessary to accompany artificial intelligence?
Yeah, the durable skills. I can't get too far away from that Sesame Street app because I'm certain that I used it with kids in a classroom. I was an early childhood teacher for 8 years, and the iPad was kind of new on the scene, and there were a lot of apps that we went through and a lot of apps that we played with, and Sesame Street was always one that's like, oh, it's Sesame Street, it's got to be safe. Let's put it on the app and let's go through this together. But the durable skills are really critical to all of this. Those translate across every domain. What we say when we say durable skills, I think is something that we're still trying to navigate. Is people call them soft skills, transferable skills, and we really at the lab have created a set of skills that we think have been captured really well by a lot of the stakeholders that helped us develop them. Another group that's created a sort of a taxonomy of skills is America Succeeds. They put out an entire durable skills framework that we also worked with them on that outlines this pretty clearly and has levels of competency associated with them. That framework's been validated by employers, and I think that's really important in this conversation, is that we can talk about durable skills in any context we want, but if this is really about helping individuals be prepared to be successful in new job roles, then we need to make sure that the employers that are on the other side of the equation are invested in those skills, and that those are skills that are valuable for them. And so one of the tools that we use to develop our micropathway is called the T profile. So it's a classic T, and on one side of the T are the durable skills that are most needed for specific job roles. So we take a job role and really dig into that one. And then the other side of the T is the technical skills that are needed to be most successful in that job role. Now, we're gonna leave out some of the skills, but when you only focus on the top 3, but those are the ones that are most demonstrated and needed in those roles. And a lot of employers actually say, you know what? We can teach them anything as long as they show up on time, they're sober, they have a good attitude, and they're ready to work. And this literally verbatim, the conversations that we have. And there was an employer that we were working with in a very rural part of the country that when we were in this conversation, we're like, well, where do you start when you're looking for an employee, someone you might want to hire? And he said, I'm looking for a pulse. That's his starting point, right? Because he wants somebody that's going to show up, have a positive attitude, can be a problem solver, and can consistently do the work, and he can teach them anything technically that they need to be successful in that role. So those skills become really critically important no matter what the task at hand is.
And if I could, I'd like to go back to the HR professional now, since I used that sort of as my early introduction.
I was going to go there, so I'm glad you went there.
Okay, so if you want to be an HR professional today, and I think that this is a challenge for education institutions, so one of the things that happened as we went through the transformation around the infusion of artificial intelligence to support HR functions in corporations is we raised the skill level of the job up about 150%. So what was originally the skill level to come in and work, be an HR professional in IBM, that is now a digital worker. So it doesn't exist anymore. But the job that does exist requires about 150% more skill than the job that did exist. So that job now manages the HR conversational agent. It makes sure that the agent is behaving properly. It helps train it, so it identifies the data sets to train it. That job requires really understanding all of that kind of stuff. And it pays a heck of a lot more money.
Right.
Okay, so what an education institution needs to do for somebody who wants to be an HR professional is teach them how to do this, right? They need to come in prepared.
That would be an entry-level role coming into IBM, but just at a much higher level, and it pays more.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so when they come out, they need to be trained and they need to be prepared to use a digital worker as part of their work job every single day. And this is going to be true across every field you could think of where the task that a person is doing follows a very discrete logic, clear steps, clear use of information. So CPAs, attorneys, investment bankers, sort of on and on and on. All of those kinds of roles are going to be replaced by digital workers.
Really, and it's really understanding how these law firms and accounting firms are now going to be altering their hiring patterns to reflect this is what we need now.
That's right.
To go into that.
That's right. And education institutions need to prepare people to do that.
Absolutely. So one of the most important concepts that I know we wanted to hit before we close out was the importance of the humans being in the loop here. I think it's very easy to say, oh my God, AI is going to take over, but actually there is a huge role that humans play, and this first bullet that we're talking about here is oversight and guidance around ethics. And I don't know, maybe Alex and Colin, you can both briefly chat a little bit about that first component.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't say enough about the importance of it. I mean, ultimately, one of my colleagues described artificial intelligent agents as idiot savants. They're amazingly good at what they do, only if they know what to do. But if they don't know what to do, they do really weird things. And they also rely entirely on historical data. And so one of the things we've been involved in for years now is to wipe the bias, scrape the bias, and the profanities and all the weird things that it can do out of those data sets. And so ethical use of AI is just essential. And it's human beings who have ethics. Computers don't have ethics, and they don't have morals. They just do what you tell them to do. And so humans are essential.
Some AI may argue that point. I don't know. That's it. Colin?
Well, yeah, and it's super scary, right? I think there are a lot of examples you can look at of crazy hallucinations and other sort of loaded responses from AI agents. It was part of the Experience U project when we established the first core set of standards and requirements for teams to build against. We actually worked with IBM's team on ethical use of AI and mapping bias in the agents and the tools that they're creating. So it's a combination of teams who are using existing AI resources and then other teams who are building resources from scratch, language models from scratch. And one of the exercises that I remember the team taking us through was called power mapping and layers of effect. Those are two separate activities, but they were really looking at, okay, what are some of the unintended consequences that might emerge from the use of this tool in this context? And when you start to get really context specific, that's when you can start to make educated guesses, but really prepare for some unknowns when you're interacting with agents that have some ability to create and generate content that you can't fully anticipate or control. So I think, having some structures and tools to really think about and strategize on how you can get anticipated outcomes, but then also unintended consequences that are based on the systems that we've built to this point, which we know aren't really fair and equitable in many ways. Right. It's kind of a nice inflection point for us to say, hey, what can we do differently, and how can we actually create models and tools that are going to build the future that we want, not the future that we've been a part of, or the past that we've been a part of.
No, and that's a great point. And the involvement of humans to test artificial intelligence, I know it's something I think I mentioned last year. The White House does this annual convening, I forgot to call it, I think black flag or red flag events, where they bring diverse teams of data scientists together to basically find the errors, to go and intentionally look for the bias, and they find it. And the importance that they raised, and it was a presentation that I think I saw from IBM, that part of the challenge with developing artificial intelligence models is that only about 10% of the data scientists out there are people of color, Latino background. You don't have a diverse set of people who can actually challenge the artificial intelligence that's out there. So you have some very well-intentioned people, right? So let's make believe everyone's well-intentioned, but the perspective is not there. And that creates room for bias. And we talked earlier today about skills and frameworks, but there's an important point called context and the national and regional context of different things. And that's just another form as we leverage artificial intelligence to try to help us solve for some of these recognition gaps and so on. How do we ensure that the training that's going on is holistic and inclusive, right, of everything that we're doing? Colin, anything or Alex to add to this point?
Yeah, the way that the lab approaches a lot of our design challenges are, we've created a learner engagement framework that is a Venn diagram of 3 circles, but in the middle are the people most proximate to the problem. And a lot of this work takes time because it involves humans, it involves relationships, and you can't do that. AI can't replace that. AI is not going to develop a relationship across a broad set of stakeholders and put the individual learners and earners in the middle of that conversation and include them in the design of solutions. And so that's the way that we approach these problems, is by taking an equity-centered approach with those individuals and designing alongside with them and doing a lot of mapping. And we have a whole suite of tools, and we're constantly building new tools to really help get those humans and their experiences and the impact of the potential impact of these solutions on them, right? Logging into a platform, it may seem like a pretty straightforward thing to somebody who's building the platform, but if we're talking about individuals who don't have consistent access to internet, don't have transportation to the career center that they need to get to, those are real challenges that we need to consider when we're talking about and developing solutions that are meant to serve them in ways that they need.
And I would just sort of taking another frame on it. I mean, remember, these tools are First off, this is nothing new, right? This has been going on since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So we have lots of examples of how tools transform our society. The whole point of this is to augment human intelligence. That's the idea, to free people up from doing tasks that are repetitive and redundant and low paid and boring, and give them space and time to do what humans do best, which is to be creative and empathetic and make the world a better place and more equitable. And so this will continue, really continue to be true. And then the other thing I think we'll see more of is humans crave human contact. I mean, that's where the action actually is. And so human contact will become more valuable, not less valuable, because as more of this kind of work is automated, I mean, I don't know about you, but I just hate talking to these artificial intelligence agents when I'm trying to like talk to a human being on the phone to solve a problem. And, and people will pay a premium for human contact, because ultimately that's really what it's about, is connecting people and eliminating this rote work. And just one last thought, the potential for these tools to expand access and create a better world is really very high. Just think about the ability for us to improve the identification of breast cancer through the fact that artificial intelligence is more accurate in reading mammograms than human beings are. You could now do this at scale for everybody in the world. So the potential there is just huge.
It is tremendous. And, I think, so we're at a point where we have to close it out. So let's summarize where we are before I get the hook from the team that has to come up after me, right, Melanie? So the first thing that we'll see here is that the future of work will be characterized by the continued rise of digital workers across many industries. It's going to continue to evolve. Think of the challenge that it's going to bring into skills, frameworks, and networks for certain roles that have been defined traditionally in certain ways that are going to go through continuous evolution. So there's going to be a real, pressure on understanding how we can take these changes and make sure that it is well understood with the new artificial intelligence enablement. Secondly, we've got the need for humans to improve the understanding of how to work alongside AI. Not something to be feared, but something to recognize, how do we work together with artificial intelligence? And finally, there's no question that AI can help enhance education and workforce development, but humans need to stay involved, and that's really, really important. And you heard earlier that Alex used the tool, Colin used the tool, and they came to an interesting conclusion. So it was, we believe that by working together, we can create a future where humans and AI work together to achieve great things, said the AI. Right? Work with us to create great things. So it's really interesting when you think about, we had a 1-hour conversation that we started out with, and this presentation itself was curated out of that 1-hour conversation. And notice how AI referenced people as humans. And you didn't see the word people anywhere here on this presentation, because they refer to us as humans. And I wanted to bring that point home, that there's nomenclature involved here as you're working with artificial intelligence. And it's really interesting. It's evolving. I think it's going to get smarter. So at the end here, final word, Alex, and then Colin. Anything you want to add here?
Colin, go ahead.
I would only try to look at this as a glass half full. I mean, that's definitely my attitude in all of this, is that it's a tremendous opportunity, and there's certainly a lot of, holes that we can step in, but it's really exciting to think that there's ways to now map and translate in ways in opportunities that we didn't have before. And I think that's really what is exciting to me, is that it actually is creating a whole new level of access for folks, in a whole new sort of way of imagining and experiencing the world, that if it's included in great ways, you'll get more than just, suggested shows on Netflix and other streaming platforms. You'll really get really powerful new concepts, and you'll be able to scale things in a way that we just couldn't before. So I'm definitely take the glass half full if you are intentional and involve those people that are most proximate to the problem when you're working on building solutions together.
Yep, Alex?
So all of you here have influential positions, all of us do. And I think it's incumbent on us to provide leadership. Much of this leadership is around education. Much of it is around us modeling the right way to approach these issues and the right way to help our colleagues navigate their way through this. I think it's incumbent on us to be aware of both the potential and also the challenges, and to lead the way on articulating how we navigate ourselves through it, and to remember that ultimately all of this is about human potential, augmenting human potential, supporting human potential, helping people realize their dreams. And we need to, as policymakers and as thought leaders and financial leaders, apply those resources, keeping really clear what this is about. We're going through a transformation in the world today, and that transformation will continue.
Thank you. And just for the folks in the room, I'll just say that the Clearinghouse, as you know, we have a very large data set that has not yet been used as a foundational data set for any artificial intelligence-based research. And that's because the first thing that we're doing is we're going to bring in 2 third parties to analyze it for bias. We've been collecting data for 30 years, and the quality of that data has evolved over time. Articulation has changed over that time. So we need to understand, if you are a holder of data sets, you need to understand your own data so that you can predict almost where the biases are going to show up right before that data set is used as an analytical and foundational building tool for artificial intelligence. And maybe next year at Oslo, I'll have an update on that. So thank you. Thank you.